The dog that barked at silence. The hallway was empty when Officer Noah Reed walked in, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, just wrong. He wasn't supposed to be there. Bruno, his German Shepherd canine partner, wasn't assigned to schools. But something pulled him toward Granite Hollow Elementary that morning. Maybe it was the snow, maybe it was fate, or maybe Bruno had already sensed what the adults refused to see. They passed lockers, backpacks half-zipped, a janitor whistling off-key, and then Bruno froze. At the end of the hallway stood a boy, maybe 10, face blank, one arm hanging stiffly by his side. He didn't cry, he didn't speak. But Bruno stepped forward, lowered his head, and barked. Not a warning bark, not aggression. It was the kind of bark that made people turn, that made silence crack. And what they discovered after that, what had been happening right under everyone's noses, would shake the entire town. All because one dog still knew how to listen. The snow had come heavy in the night, unannounced, but not unexpected. In Granite Hollow, Colorado, winter never asked for permission. It simply arrived. By morning, the town looked like it had been dipped in powdered sugar, rooftops sagging under the soft weight, tree branches frozen mid-reach, and streets transformed into quiet, silver lanes where even echoes walked lightly. From behind the frost-kissed windshield of Patrol Unit Number 217, Officer Noah Callan let out a slow breath that fogged the glass before him. He adjusted the heater and glanced briefly to his right. In the passenger seat sat Bruno, his 6-year-old German Shepherd canine partner, upright and alert as always. Bruno didn't blink much. His ears twitched now and then, listening to sounds that Noah could no longer hear, shifts in the wind, the subtle groan of settling snow, the whine of something distant and uncertain. Noah envied him for that. There was a time when he, too, could feel what wasn't said, sense tension before it took shape. But war and loss had dulled his edges. Bruno had become his sharpened instinct. The cruiser rolled slowly through the outer edge of Red Valley District, its tires crunching over salt-lined pavement. Above them, the morning sky hung low and colorless, muted pewter stretching from Pine Ridge to Pine Ridge. Noah flicked his gaze between the road and the rows of houses, each still asleep, each light a warm promise inside the cold. He shifted in his seat, the bulk of his winter patrol jacket pulling slightly at the shoulder seams. Beneath it, his standard-issue Navy uniform felt tighter these days, not from weight, but from wear. His silver badge caught a glint of pale light as they passed his eyes. It had been 2 years since his wife died. Cancer, quick and cruel. Since then, the house had gone quiet, and so had he. Most days, it was only Bruno who pulled him back from that edge, not with words, but with presence. A breath beside him, a silent nod in the dark. Ahead, Pine Hollow Road emerged like a path in a snow globe, flanked by skeletal birch trees bowing under the weight of their burden. He slowed the cruiser, instinctively scanning the snow-covered sidewalks near Red Valley Elementary School. The bell wouldn't ring for another hour, but he always did an early loop, habit, maybe, or a promise he once made to a teacher long gone. The heater rattled faintly. Bruno shifted in his seat. Noah noticed the twitch in his partner's left ear, the way his gaze angled just slightly toward the right-hand curb. "You catch something?" Bruno didn't answer, of course, but his body stiffened, not with fear, but focus. Noah slowed the vehicle even more, steering past a row of parked maintenance trucks, still dusted with untouched snow. His eyes swept the sidewalk, the schoolyard, the edges of the bus drop-off zone. Everything looked undisturbed. Still, something crawled under his skin. The radio squawked briefly, a weather advisory warning of another front moving in by evening. But Noah barely registered it. His thoughts wandered to yesterday's meeting at the precinct. The words still rang in his ears. "We're reviewing canine program costs, Noah. The town's small, quiet. It might be time to scale back." Deputy Chief Graves hadn't even looked him in the eye when she said it. Quiet. They always said it like it was a blessing, but Noah knew better. Quiet towns hid loud pain. He'd seen it, in bruises half covered by sleeves, in runaway teens walking in socks through sleet, in kids who never raised their hands because they weren't sure they'd be noticed if they disappeared. Bruno stirred again. Just a breath of tension in the muscles along his spine. Noah reached for the dashboard and tapped the lights, not sirens. Just a pulse of blue and red, faint and thoughtful, like a lighthouse through fog. "Let's loop past the bus shelter," he said, more to himself than to the dog. Bruno's ears twitched. The cruiser rolled along the school fence line, past the faded mural of painted handprints and bright letters that read, "You are seen." The irony wasn't lost on Noah. His gaze dropped to the passenger mirror, catching sight of his own reflection. Square, tail stiff, eyes locked on something Noah couldn't see yet. "Bruno?" Noah's tone dropped, steady, ready. The dog let out a quiet whine, the kind he rarely used. Noah pressed his boot to the brake and leaned forward. There, just beyond the edge of the bench, nearly obscured by a curtain of wind-blown snow, was a small shape. Motionless, slumped. Noah's pulse skipped. Bruno pressed his nose to the glass and let out a low, guttural growl, not aggressive, not loud, but warning. It wasn't the town's quiet that had unnerved Bruno. It was what the quiet was hiding. Noah cut the engine. "Okay, boy," he murmured, eyes locked ahead. "Let's go see what the snow tried to bury." The cruiser turned the corner onto Maple Street, tires crunching over frozen gravel, as the red brick walls of Red Valley Elementary came into view. Its facade still dark, the windows rimmed with frost. A thin mist hovered just above the ground, curling like breath from a sleeping giant. The world here hadn't quite woken up, but something had. Inside the patrol car, Bruno shifted. Noah caught it immediately. Not a bark, not even a growl, just the quiet, unmistakable way the dog's body tensed. The ears went forward, the breathing slowed, the kind of stillness that wasn't passive, but poised. "Talk to me," Noah murmured, eyes flicking from the schoolyard to the sidewalk. "What is it?" Bruno didn't glance back. His nose twitched twice. Then he pressed his paw forward against the dash, a silent urge. Noah eased his foot off the gas and let the cruiser coast along the curb near the bus shelter, its plastic walls half fogged with ice, a halo of silence around it. It looked empty at first glance, just a bench, a trash can buried in snow, and footprints that led nowhere. The kind of corner people passed without thinking. The kind of place silence could hide something terrible. Bruno's breath fogged the glass. Then he barked, once, sharp and controlled. Noah flinched. Bruno never barked unless it mattered. "Okay," he said softly, pulling the cruiser into park. He grabbed his gloves, clipped Bruno's lead, and stepped out into the wind. The cold hit like a slap, dry and immediate. Noah's coat did little to stop it, the kind of cold that made joints ache and memories sting. He stepped lightly, snow crunching beneath him. Bruno moved at his side, posture low, nose to the air, then to the ground. The shelter loomed ahead, small and fur-throat. The boy couldn't have been older than 7, maybe 8. Small frame, blonde hair, soaked red flannel jacket, jeans clinging to thin legs, frozen stiff. The boy was sitting, or maybe had collapsed that way, back slumped, knees drawn in, head down. His arms were wrapped around his middle in the kind of posture you only saw when someone was trying not to feel. Bruno stopped a few feet away and sat, silent. Noah crouched, slowly, instinctively. He didn't speak right away. The boy hadn't seen them, or didn't react if he had. The stillness, it wasn't sleep. It was something else, something colder. His coat was visibly wet from the waist down, the kind of wet that had turned the denim rigid. Urine. Noah's throat tightened. The boy was trembling uncontrollably now, almost imperceptibly, like a leaf shivering under frost. Bruno let out a low, aching sound, a whine full of knowing, soft and restrained, like he understood the moment demanded reverence. "Hey there," Noah said quietly, voice low like a lullaby. "My name's Officer Callan. This here's Bruno. We're not gonna hurt you. We just want to help." The boy didn't move. Noah knelt closer, one hand bracing against the icy bench for balance. The boy's face came into view, and it hollowed something inside him. One cheek swollen, purple-blue, lip cracked and dry, eyes glassy, unfocused, not from shock alone, but from being outside too long. The kind of cold that didn't just touch skin, it crawled under it. "Son," Noah said, gently this time, "can you tell me your name?" Still nothing. Then Bruno did something Noah hadn't expected. He rose slowly, walked to the boy without waiting for instruction, and sat beside him. Shoulder pressed gently to the boy's thigh, not assertive, not invasive, just there. The boy didn't flinch. If anything, his body leaned toward the heat. Bruno let out a single exhale, a puff of white mist rising from his muzzle into the bitter air. Noah watched them in silence. Sometimes, he thought, the human voice just wasn't enough. Then the boy blinked. One slow blink, like thaw breaking across ice. I'm Ethan," he whispered, barely audible. 7. The name broke something in Noah, a wall, a breath, something he hadn't noticed he'd been holding. "Okay, Ethan," he said softly. "You're safe now. We're here." Ethan's jaw trembled. His lips had turned a dusky shade of purple. He kept glancing down at Bruno, as if unsure whether the dog was real. Then Noah's eyes caught it. A streak of red Ethan's shoulders. The boy flinched, but didn't pull away. His small fingers grasped the sleeves, clutching the fabric like it was the only thing left tethering him to the world. Noah reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is 217. I have a minor, male, approximately 7 years old, nonverbal at initial contact, signs of possible abuse and hypothermia, visible contusion on right cheek, blood on lower right torso. Requesting EMS at Red Valley Bus Shelter. Immediate." Copy that 217 ETA 5 minutes. Bruno stayed pressed against Ethan, eyes scanning the silent street, ears twitching with every gust of wind. Guarding. Grounding. Bearing witness. Noah crouched beside them both, one hand on Bruno's back, the other gently resting on Ethan's shoulder. The boy didn't look at him, but he didn't shrink either. And as the sirens began to rise faintly in the distance, Noah realized something. It hadn't been his badge or his training or even the timing that saved this boy. It had been Bruno, a dog who didn't need to speak to tell the truth. The world had gone quiet again, not the kind of quiet that brings peace, but the kind that wraps around your ribs like wire and pulls slowly inward. Snow fell in listless spirals now, drifting through the air like dust inside a long-forgotten attic. Officer Noah Callan stayed kneeling next to the boy, trying not to move too quickly, trying not to make the moment shatter. Ethan hadn't spoken since whispering his name, not another word, just clutched the sleeves of Noah's coat and stared at the ground, lips a dull violet. His small frame trembled in a way that didn't feel connected to the cold anymore. It felt deeper than that, a kind of shaking that lived in the marrow. Beside him, Bruno remained still, his body curled slightly toward the child. The German shepherd's thick coat was lightly dusted in snow now, his breath slow and measured, but his ears, they never stopped moving, always listening. Noah glanced down again, eyes catching on the details, things most people would overlook if they weren't trained to see. The bruising on Ethan's cheek wasn't old, it was angry, swollen, likely from a sharp blow. His backpack, now half buried in snow at his feet, had one strap torn clean at the seam, the fabric frayed like it had been yanked hard. He reached out slowly, careful not to startle the boy. "Ethan, do you live nearby?" No answer. The boy blinked, barely. Noah sighed softly and lowered himself to sit fully on the icy bench beside them. The chill bit through his uniform, but he didn't care. Sometimes proximity was the only kind of comfort left. Bruno, as if sensing the shift, stood up and turned toward Ethan. He moved slowly, respectfully, almost reverently, then gently sniffed the boy's side again. Then came the growl, soft, low, and buried in the chest. Not a warning, not aggression, but voice just above a whisper. The dog looked at him, not with panic, but with certainty. And that was enough. Noah leaned forward, eyes narrowing on the spot where Bruno had focused. The boy's jacket, once red flannel, now soaked and stiff, was darker on the right side, near the lower ribs. Noah hesitated, then spoke as gently as he could. "Ethan, I need to check something. You're doing really well, okay? Just a quick look." The boy's grip on the sleeves didn't loosen, but he gave the faintest of nods. Noah unzipped the coat, his own, which now hung loosely over the child's shoulders. Underneath, Ethan wore a thermal long-sleeve shirt, faded and clinging to his small frame. And just beneath that hem, barely visible unless you were eye level, was a deep stain spreading outward. Not just wet from snow. Red. Saturated. Noah felt the air pull from his lungs. "Jesus," he muttered under his breath. The bruise above it, a deep spreading violet, looked like it had been caused by a kick, hard and deliberate. It wasn't a simple fall, not with that pattern. Noah exhaled through his nose, keeping his voice steady. "You're going to be okay, Ethan. I've called for help. They're almost here." The boy flinched again, curling inward, like the sound of hope had become unfamiliar. Bruno responded first. He stepped closer, then without hesitation, lowered his body to the snow beside the bench and rested his head gently against Ethan's boot. Ethan looked down slowly. His fingers trembled as they reached forward, hesitant, unsure, then found the thick fur along Bruno's neck. He didn't pet him. He just held on, like a child gripping the last solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop spinning. The distant echo of a siren rolled across the snow-draped street. Noah lifted his head, eyes scanning the sidewalk, the treetops, the bend in the road. Relief should have come with that sound, but it didn't, not entirely. Because this, whatever had happened to Ethan, didn't begin this morning, and a medic's arrival wouldn't be the end of it. "Just hold on, buddy," he murmured, more to himself than to the boy. "We're going to get you somewhere warm." Bruno's ears flicked at the sound of tires turning onto the street nearby. Noah stood slowly, brushing snow from his knees. He took a step forward, his boots cracking against the frozen slush, and looked back one more time. Ethan still hadn't spoken, but the grip he had on Bruno's fur had tightened. That said more than enough. The flashing lights of the ambulance cast color across the white, red and blue flickering like something from another world. Noah flagged them down. As the medic stepped out, quick and purposeful, he turned and said firmly, 7-year-old male, signs of physical abuse, possible...
Got it.
Noah paused. "And he only responds to the dog," he added. "Let the shepherd stay close." The medics exchanged a glance, hesitated, then nodded. Bruno followed closely as they approached, never breaking pace. When the gurney was lowered beside Ethan, the boy looked up only once, toward Bruno, and whispered something Noah couldn't hear. But Bruno did. He pressed his head against the boy's knee, and Ethan, for the first time, closed his eyes. Not from pain, but from relief. Noah stood back, hands on his hips, watching as the boy was loaded into the back of the ambulance. His own coat went with him. The torn backpack remained on the bench. As the doors closed and the siren bloomed again into the sky, Noah felt the snowfall resume. Not hard, not furious, just soft, like the town had exhaled. But beneath the cold, something had changed, and it hadn't started with a scream. It started with a dog who refused to bark. The siren cut through the still air like a blade. It wasn't loud yet, just a wail on the wind, somewhere behind the frost and trees, but Ethan flinched anyway. His shoulders jerked in a muscle memory way, like he'd learned to expect pain when new sounds entered the scene. Noah saw it, so did Bruno. Noah stepped back from the boy, not out of disinterest, but respect. Some children needed closeness. Others needed space. Ethan needed Bruno. The German shepherd hadn't moved since lying down beside the boy. His posture was steady, calm, not dominant, not passive, just there. It was a presence that didn't ask anything, didn't command, it simply offered. "Dispatch, this is 217, Noah said into his shoulder mic, voice low but firm. "Child victim located, 7 years old, male, initials EL, nonverbal, hypothermic, suspected internal trauma, signs of recent physical abuse. Requesting immediate EMIS response. Location remains Red Valley Bus Shelter." "Copy 217, EAMS inbound approximately 3 minutes out." Noah looked back at Ethan. The boy had drawn his knees in tighter, the weight of Noah's coat heavy around him like an oversized memory. He wasn't crying, but something in his posture spoke louder than tears ever could. Bruno let out a breath, a soft, audible sigh. It wasn't meant for Noah, but he felt it just the same. He crouched again, slowly, making sure to move without suddenness. "Hey, buddy," he said gently. "Help is almost here. They're good people. They'll take care of you." Ethan didn't answer. He kept his eyes fixed on the slush beneath his soaked boots, his jaw clenched, fingers digging into the coat sleeve like it might disappear if he didn't hold it tight. Noah tried again, this time reaching out, just to adjust the coat around the boy's side. It had slipped down slightly, exposing his shoulder to the air. String had pulled taut across his spine. Noah froze. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, pulling his hand back at once. "You're in control here. I promise." Bruno didn't move, but his eyes lifted toward Noah as if to say, "You did the right thing." The snow had started falling again, finer now, like a veil. It landed across Bruno's back, on the bench behind Ethan, across the boy's pale hair that had started to dry in clumps. The air carried that sterile metallic scent that always came before a hard freeze. Then something small shifted. Bruno, still lying at the boy's feet, moved his head forward and placed it softly across Ethan's shoe. Not pushing, just contact. Just enough. And Ethan didn't move away. His hands twitched once. Then he slid one slowly down the sleeve of Noah's coat and let it rest on Bruno's neck. His fingers didn't curl or pet, just lay there, as if to ask, "Are you real?" Bruno exhaled again, and Noah blinked, hard. Something in his chest cracked open with that single gesture. Not from pity, not from sorrow, but from recognition. Because he had once been a boy too, flinching from noise, from hands, from the wrong kind of love. He didn't speak for a long moment. He just sat beside them, the cold creeping into his knees, the silence pressing gently against the space between them. The sirens were louder now, closer. But for that stretch of minutes, the only thing that mattered was the weight of a dog's head on a child's shoe, and the hand that didn't pull away. Then the ambulance appeared. Flashing lights broke through the tree line, scattering color against the snowbanks. Red and blue danced across the shelter's frost-touched walls. The sound of tires slowing, then doors slamming open. Medics in navy parkas with neon striping approached with purpose. But Noah stood first. "Easy," he called out gently. "Victim is stable, conscious, cautious around touch. Dog needs to stay close." The lead EMT, a woman in her 30s with steady eyes, nodded quickly. "Understood." She approached slowly, a thermal blanket in hand. Bruno rose too, as if understanding the rhythm now, a protector but never in the way. Ethan stiffened again as the stranger drew near. But when Bruno stepped closer beside him, the boy didn't bolt. He let the woman kneel, let her speak. "We're going to lift you now, sweetheart," she said. Not patronizing, not too sweet, just real. "You're safe. You've got a good team around you, especially that guy." She nodded toward Bruno, and for the first time since he'd been looked at Noah. "He rides with us?" Noah nodded once. "He's while the kid's alive." The man shrugged. "Fine by me." Bruno jumped into the rig with practiced ease, settling near Ethan's feet, tail still, eyes calm. As the doors closed, Noah stood in the snow alone for a beat. His breath fogged in the cold, his boots soaked now, fingers stinging. But there was warmth in him that hadn't been there in a long time. The cruiser sat parked just behind him, still running. The radio crackled faintly with another officer's voice miles away. He didn't answer. Instead, he whispered to himself, "Stay with him, Bruno. I'll catch up." And for the first time that morning, he didn't feel the cold. The fluorescent lights inside Granite Hollow Medical Center buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over pale walls and the faint scent of antiseptic. It was a small hospital, just 2 floors, tucked into a wooded ridge near the edge of town, a place more used to sprained ankles and mild frostbite than cases like this. But this morning, the trauma bay was quiet, and everyone inside knew why. Ethan lay motionless on the padded exam table, dwarfed by the thick thermal blanket wrapped around him. He hadn't spoken since arriving, hadn't cried, hadn't asked where he was. He just stared, his blue eyes too old for a 7-year-old, were locked on the ceiling tiles, unmoving. Only the rise and fall of his chest, shallow and slow, hinted at life underneath. Noah stood by the doorway, still in uniform, arms folded tightly over his chest. His boots were wet from the snow, leaving melting prints on the tile floor, but he hadn't noticed. His eyes were locked on the boy, watching, waiting. Bruno sat just outside the room, obedient but reluctant, separated only by the narrow glass panel. His ears twitched every time Ethan so much as shifted, his core temperatures climbing slowly. The nurse reported quietly to the attending physician.
Blankets are helping, but he's still under normal. BP's a little low, pupils reactive.
Dr. Hal Marin, a man in his early 50s with tired eyes and the hands of someone who'd done this too many times, nodded without looking away from the boy.
Ribs?
He asked.
Right side is tender to touch, the nurse said. He flinched during palpation. No obvious fractures, but I want imaging.
And the bruising?
New. Deep discoloration along the cheekbone and flank. Some older yellowing on his upper arm too. Pattern looks repeated.
Dr. Marin said nothing for a long moment. Then he stepped closer and lowered himself onto the rolling stool beside the exam table.
Ethan,
he said gently.
Can you hear me, buddy?
No answer. Safe now. That matters, okay? You're in a place where no one can hurt you. My name's Dr. Marin. The lady who helped you earlier, that was Nurse Callie. We've got hot blankets and warm soup coming.
Ethan's eyes didn't move, but his hand, resting limply on the blanket, twitched, barely. Marin saw it too.
Do you want me to stop talking?
He asked. Still no answer, but the twitch came again. The doctor leaned back slightly, then stood.
That's a yes,
he said softly.
Okay, kiddo. No more talking. Not unless you're ready.
He turned to Noah, voice low now.
He's in a classic freeze response. Shock and likely trauma-induced mutism. No fight, no flight, just still.
Noah nodded. He didn't even cry when I found him. Marin's brow furrowed.
That's not strength,
he said.
That's conditioning.
They both looked at the boy, who hadn't moved.
He's been trained not to react.
The words hung in the air like smoke. A nurse came in with a heated IV bag, her footsteps quiet. She moved with the softness of someone who had worked with frightened children before. As she adjusted the line at Ethan's arm, he flinched, but didn't pull away. Noah noticed something. The boy's eyes drifted, not to the nurse, not to the doctor, but toward the glass panel by the door. Toward Bruno. The dog sat upright, still as a statue. But the moment Ethan looked, Bruno's ears lifted, his head tilted slightly. He didn't move closer. He didn't need to. Let him in, Noah said. Dr. Marin raised an eyebrow.
Hospital protocol says
He's not a dog right now. He's a lifeline. There was a pause. Then the doctor gave a nod. Noah stepped into the hallway, unlatched the door, and gestured once. Easy, boy. Bruno trotted in with quiet confidence, his nails clicking softly against the tile. He made no sound, no dramatic entrance. He simply walked straight to the bed and sat, exactly where he had been earlier, near Ethan's feet. The boy's eyes shifted again. This time they stayed. Bruno placed his head lightly on the edge of the mattress. Noah watched from the far wall. The nurses didn't speak. The doctor said nothing. They all watched a boy begin, in the smallest way possible, to reconnect with the world. Ethan's hand crept forward, a slow, shaking motion, like it weighed more than he could bear. Then, gently, his fingers rested on Bruno's head. No words, no tears, just contact. Noah closed his eyes. After everything, after the frozen sidewalk, after the blood and bruises.
Quiet was heavy. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of things unspoken. Ethan lay on his side facing the wall, blanket drawn up to his chin, his tiny frame dwarfed by the hospital bed. The IV line in his arm pulsed faintly with warmth, but his body still trembled beneath the layers. His eyes were open, staring, watching a world he didn't quite trust anymore. Noah sat in the corner, elbows on his knees, silent. He'd taken off his utility belt and radio. The badge still rested on his chest, but he hadn't touched it in hours. He didn't need a uniform in this room. He needed patience. "Still no change," Nurse Callie whispered as she slipped in, adjusting the drip. "Vitals stable, but he hasn't spoken, barely blinked." Noah nodded once. "He's in there," he said quietly. "He just doesn't know yet if we're listening." She smiled sadly. Most adults don't. Then the door creaked open again. Bruno stepped in, slow and deliberate. Noah had pulled strings, bent policy, even ignored a sideways look from administration. But no one had stopped him, because anyone who had seen the boy and the dog together, even once, knew Bruno didn't just belong at the scene. He belonged at the center of it. The shepherd approached the bed like he had the night before, without announcement, without hurry, just presence. The sound of his nails on tile was almost too soft to notice, but Noah saw Ethan's eyes shift slightly, not toward the nurse, not toward him, toward Bruno. Bruno sat beside the bed, close but not touching. His gaze didn't waver. He didn't pant, didn't blink. Just watched the boy with the calm of something older than language. For a long while, no one moved. Then Noah spoke, barely a whisper. "You okay with some company, kiddo?" No response. Bruno lowered his body down to the floor and rested his chin gently against the edge of the bed frame. The fabric ruffled. The boy's hand twitched. And then, for the first time, Ethan shifted. His fingers slipped from beneath the blanket, trembling slightly as they reached down and found Bruno's fur. Not to pet, to anchor. The dog didn't move. Ethan let out a breath, shallow, fractured. Then, barely above the hush of the IV machine, he whispered, He pushed me." Noah's head snapped up. He didn't speak, didn't move, just listened. Ethan's fingers curled slightly tighter into Bruno's fur. Then he laughed. His voice cracked mid-word, brittle and afraid. Noah stood slowly, moving closer, but not too close. Escape, until now. Bruno let out a breath, slow and deep. Then Ethan moved, suddenly and all at once. He sat up too quickly, ivy lines shifting, blankets falling to his waist, and flung his arms around the shepherd's neck. He didn't ask permission, he just held on, buried his face in the thick sable fur and shook. Bruno leaned in without hesitation, pressing his body into the boy's side, letting the weight of him absorb the trembling. Noah swallowed hard. His hand twitched at his side, instinctively reaching for the radio that wasn't there. But this wasn't a call to dispatch. This was a call to truth. He crouched beside the bed, slow and steady. "Kyle," he repeated. "Is he a student on the bus?" Ethan nodded into Bruno's neck. Noah didn't press further. He didn't need every detail right now. What he needed was this, a beginning. "That's all I needed, buddy," he said. "You did really good." Ethan didn't respond, but he didn't let go either. Bruno stayed perfectly still, his breathing slow, his eyes half closed in that way dogs have when they're doing something sacred. After a while, the boy's grip loosened. He pulled back and looked at Noah. His face was red, his eyes rimmed with tears, but they were clear now, present. "I didn't think anyone would believe me," he whispered. Noah blinked, the edges of his vision threatening to blur. He didn't answer immediately, just reached forward, slow, and placed a hand over Ethan's, the one still resting on Bruno's back. "I believe you," he said. "And so does he." Bruno gave a soft exhale, tail thumping once. It was the only sound the boy needed. The school bus sat where it always did, facing east along Brookside Avenue, flanked by two salt-stained sedans and a puddle of slush that hadn't yet frozen again. Yellow paint dulled by weather. Windshield streaked with yesterday's storm. From the outside, it looked like any other small-town route vehicle, waiting to collect noise and laughter and backpack straps tangled in excitement. But Officer Noah Callan wasn't here for any of that. He stood on the sidewalk, gloves tucked into his belt, eyes fixed on the figure leaning against the open bus door. Mitch Rickman, the route's assigned driver. Late 50s, bulked by too many years behind the wheel and too few walking outside of it. His beanie was faded Broncos orange, and his breath reeked faintly of instant coffee and something less innocent. Bruno stood at Noah's side, tail down, posture stiff, watching, listening. "Morning," Noah said, voice even. Rickman didn't offer the same courtesy, just gave a grunt and tipped his chin like someone impatient for this to be over before it began. "You were on the route yesterday," Noah said. "Sure was." "You picked up a boy, Ethan, at the Maplewood stop." Rickman scratched at his beard. "One of the kids, yeah. What about him?" Noah took a step forward. His boots left thick tracks in the patchy snow. "He ended up in the ER with internal bruising, hypothermia, and a black eye." Rickman raised one eyebrow, unmoved. And he says it happened on your bus." A flicker of something passed across Rickman's face. Not guilt, not surprise, just irritation. "These kids," he muttered. "Soft. Can't take a bump without crying to someone." Beside Noah, Bruno let out a low, deliberate growl. It came from deep in the dog's chest, controlled but undeniable. It wasn't reaction, it was warning. Rickman glanced down. "That thing always this dramatic?" Noah didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he stepped forward until he was just outside the open bus door, his shadow cutting across the first metal stair. "I want to know exactly what happened between the time you picked him up and when he got off." Rickman rolled his eyes and leaned back against the railing. "What do you think happened, officer? They were just messing around, a little roughhousing. He probably didn't want to ask to use the bathroom, ended up wetting himself, got embarrassed. Not my problem." Noah's jaw tightened. "You're telling me a first grader was assaulted in your bus, ended up injured and freezing in a snowbank, and your takeaway is not my problem?" Rickman shrugged. "I told him to hold it. We were less than 5 minutes from the school. What was I supposed to do? Pull over every time one of them whines?" Noah stared at him, long and quiet. "You're supposed to be the adult." That hung there for a beat. Rickman huffed. "You think I've got time to babysit every kid that gets teased? Back in my day, we toughed it out." Bruno moved again, a sharp pivot forward, his body angling between Noah and the stairwell, hackles ever so slightly raised. His eyes locked on the driver's legs. Rickman looked down and finally faltered. Noah didn't move. The kid bled through his shirt. "You noticed nothing?" "I drive, that's it." "That's not it anymore." Noah reached into his coat and pulled out a small notepad, flipping it open. "Name?" "You already know it." "Full legal name?" Rickman scowled. "Mitchell James Rickman." "Date of birth?" "September 14th, 1967. Noah wrote it all down. You're being reported for neglect, possible failure to protect a minor in your custody, and obstruction of a pending investigation. Rickman scoffed, but it didn't carry weight anymore. I got a route to finish. Noah stepped forward. Not to the man in front of him. I suggest, Noah said, voice low and calm, you get comfortable with people asking you hard questions, Mitch, because I'm not the last. The driver muttered something under his breath. Noah didn't need to hear it. It wasn't an apology. It was never going to be. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that Ethan wasn't invisible anymore, and neither was the man who let him suffer. As Noah turned to leave, Bruno gave one final growl, softer this time, almost like a goodbye. Or maybe it was a promise. It was nearly dusk when Noah found the boy again, tucked behind the old maple near the side entrance of Granite Hollow Elementary, where the snow gathered in uneven piles and the sun cast long shadows across the asphalt. The boy stood with his back half turned, pretending to look at the ground, but his eyes kept darting toward the corner where the school bus always parked. Liam Grayson, 12 years old, 6th grade. Quiet, always on the periphery, like a leaf unsure if it should fall or stay clinging to the branch. Earlier that morning, while Noah had been questioning Rickman, he'd spotted Liam across the lot, just a blur of a red hoodie and old sneakers, frozen in place for a moment too long before disappearing behind the portable classroom sheds. It hadn't meant much then. Now it did. Noah approached with slow, audible steps, boots crunching on salt crystals. Bruno walked beside him, silent, alert. Liam didn't run. He didn't speak. He just kept his hands buried in his hoodie pocket, thumbs fidgeting with a loose thread. "Liam?" Noah said gently. The boy nodded, just once. "You have a minute to talk?" A shrug, but he didn't move away. Noah took that as permission. He stopped about 2 feet away, not too close, and knelt down beside Bruno. "This is Bruno," he said. "He's a good listener." Bruno tilted his head, as if on cue. Liam's eyes flicked toward the dog. He didn't smile, but he looked longer than most would. "We're trying to understand what happened to Ethan," Noah continued. "We think you might have seen something." Liam hesitated. His sneakers shifted slightly on the pavement. I didn't do anything bad." "I don't think you did," Noah said, his voice soft. "But sometimes seeing something, especially something hard, can feel heavy, even when you didn't cause it." The wind picked up, tugging at the hem of Liam's coat. He bit his lower lip and finally whispered, "I saw it happen." Noah nodded once. "Did you tell anyone?" Liam shook his head quickly. "No. No one would believe me. Or they'd say I was tattling. Kyle's—" He trailed off, swallowed. "He's mean." Bruno stepped forward then, slow and unthreatening. He sat beside the boy, tail curled around his front paws, and without prompting, Liam pulled something from his pocket, a scratched-up phone, edges covered in a cracked rubber case. He looked down at it like it might bite. "I didn't mean to record it," he said. "I was just playing with slow motion and stuff. I didn't know what I was filming until after." Noah waited. Liam hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen. Then, in one motion, he unlocked it and handed it over. The video started shaky, just a blur of legs, boots in the snow, muffled voices. Then came a shout. A shove. Ethan's small body stumbling backward, hitting the bus floor. A fist raised from someone taller, Kyle, unmistakably, and the 2 other boys flanking him, laughing like it was a game. Noah's hand tightened around the phone. There were no adults in the frame. No one stepped in. The video stopped as abruptly as it had started. Liam looked down. "I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe he'd be okay, But then I saw him this morning and I felt sick. But I was scared they'd come after me too. Bruno leaned in then, nudging Liam's hand with his nose. It wasn't a command. It wasn't even encouragement. It was solidarity. Liam blinked rapidly. His voice cracked. He didn't even cry. He just let them. Like he was used to it. Noah felt something shift in his chest, something hot, something bitter. You were brave to come forward now, he said, even when it's hard. They're gonna hate me, Liam mumbled. Noah shook his head. Not the people who matter. He handed the phone back. Would you be willing to share this with the school principal? Maybe with Ethan's mom once she's ready? Liam hesitated, but then he looked down at Bruno again. The dog's amber eyes were still fixed on him, steady as stone. The boy nodded. I can come with you, Noah added. And Bruno, too, if that helps. Liam wiped his nose with his sleeve, trying to hide it like boys do. Yeah, okay. As they started walking back toward the front of the school, Liam glanced down at Bruno, then whispered under his breath, He knew. Like he knew it was bad. Noah nodded. He usually does. They walked in silence after that, but it wasn't empty. Bruno trotted between them, not like a guard or an officer, but like a bridge. And for the first time that day, something in the air felt less heavy, not lighter, but less alone. The hallway outside the vice principal's office smelled faintly of pine-scented cleaner and fear, two things that didn't belong together, yet always seemed to find each other in schools like this. Officer Noah pulled from a locker at Bruno's insistence. Bruno sat to Noah's left, unmoving. His amber eyes locked on the bag like it might come alive. His nose had brushed the fabric, once and then again. Each time, a low, guttural sound had risen in his throat. Not a bark, not a snarl. Just a warning. A soft alarm only Noah knew how to read.
Permission to search the student's property was granted by the administration.
Noah reminded himself aloud, though no one else was in the room.
No expectation of privacy under suspicion of criminal behavior.
He unzipped the main compartment. Inside, a half-eaten bag of pretzels, a crumpled comic book, a pair of old gloves, soaked at the fingertips. Then, beneath a folded sweatshirt, he saw it. A blood-stained tissue, balled tightly like someone had tried to hide it. And next to it, a coiled length of black nylon cord, about 12 inches long, knotted at one end, frayed at the other, like it had been dragged or yanked quickly. Noah stared at it. Not rope from a sled, not something that would have been handed out in a school safety course. This wasn't a toy. He lifted the cord gently with a gloved hand, held it up to the fluorescent light. The end was sticky. Bruno rose slightly, ears tilted forward. From the hallway, muffled voices broke through. A pair of sixth graders waiting to be called in. Kyle's classmates. One of them likely on thin ice for something whispered during lunch. Noah stepped out of the room with the cord still in his gloved hand. He met the boy's eyes. This was in Kyle's bag. Know what it is? The taller boy shrugged. Probably sledding rope, he said quickly. Everyone brings them when the hill's iced. Noah held up the bloodied tissue. This too? Silence. The other boy shifted uncomfortably. Maybe he had a nosebleed. Noah didn't respond. Bruno stepped forward then, not aggressively, but with deliberate slowness. His shoulders low, his body still. But the growl came again, low and certain, like truth with teeth. The taller boy took a step back. Noah knelt beside Bruno and placed the nylon cord down beside his paw. Bruno sniffed it once, then let out a quiet whine and looked up at Noah, a signal they'd rehearsed 100 times before in darker cases. This wasn't sledding gear. This had been used. Noah's jaw tightened. Thanks, boys. That'll be all. He returned to the office and sat down, laying out the contents on a clean evidence sheet. He took photos, bagged the items separately, logged the timestamp. The door opened, and Vice Principal Adler stepped in, her arms folded, her face pale. Did you find something? Noah nodded. Enough. She exhaled. You think this will hold up if charges are brought? I'm not interested in throwing a kid away.
Did he know?
Noah gave a small smile. He listens when humans lie. The room fell silent. Outside, snow had begun falling again, gently brushing the window, like a memory that refused to fade. Noah stood, glancing once more at the cord before zipping the backpack shut. This wasn't just about Kyle. It was about a pattern. The silence of authority, the easy dismissal of pain as boys being boys. A bus driver who looked away. A school where bruises were only noticed if they bled onto the carpet. But Bruno noticed, and so would Noah. They left the office quietly. As they passed the row of lockers, Bruno stopped once, beside a smaller cubby with stickers peeling off the front. It was Ethan's. Inside, a drawing was tacked to the door, a blue sky, a boy, and a large brown dog with kind eyes standing beside him. Noah didn't need a caption to understand. They were getting closer to the truth. And this time, silence wouldn't win. Kyle moved in front, grabbed Ethan's lunchbox, opened it, and dumped it into the slush. He then took Ethan's drawing, the same one Noah had seen in the locker, and ripped it in half, letting it fall like confetti. A second kick, this one harder. Ethan collapsed onto the frozen sidewalk, his backpack slipping off, strap tearing in the fall. The other boys scattered, laughter trailing them like ghosts. Noah's jaw clenched. A single exhale left his nose. But Bruno, he did something Noah hadn't seen in years. The shepherd stood up, walked to the screen, and sat directly beneath it, staring up, like he was watching a story he'd already lived. The administrator, Mr. Harlan, sat still, throat tight. There's more, he said. He turned off the feed and loaded Liam's video onto the second monitor. Liam's footage was shakier, captured from behind a nearby snowbank. The boy had tried to hide while filming. A small hand could be seen gripping the phone nervously. But the audio was clearer. Laughter. Insults. The thud of boots hitting soft resistance, Ethan's voice, barely above a whisper, pleading, "Please stop." And then, silence. Until a whisper from behind the camera, "This isn't right." Noah's eyes softened. That had been Liam's voice. Guilt and conscience, buried in a child's lungs. Noah looked down at Bruno, who now rested his head on his front paws, still facing the screen. His chest rose and fell slowly, but his eyes never blinked. "I need copies of both," Noah said, his voice low but steady. "Chain of custody starts now." Mr. Harlan nodded and began backing up the files. As the screen went dark, the room felt colder, not because of the temperature, but because of what it had revealed. It wasn't just cruelty. It was calculated dismissal, a system that failed to see pain unless it screamed. Bruno stood slowly, walked to Noah, and nudged his hand once, an action Noah didn't take lightly. "Yeah," Noah whispered. "I saw it too." They stepped out into the hallway, the soft hush of snow still falling beyond the windows. Bruno paused at the door, glanced back one more time, then faced forward. The truth had been shown. Now it was time to act on it. The conference room at Granite Hollow Elementary had never felt so silent. At the far end of the long oak table sat Kyle, slouched in a metal chair with arms crossed. His smirk, once so brazen, was now cracking under the weight of what had just played on the screen behind him. Next to him, his mother, Dana Harper, tapped her heel anxiously against the tile. Her carefully styled hair couldn't mask the tight pull of her jaw. Tyler's and Benji's parents sat nearby, equally rigid. The school principal, Ms. Langdon, sat pale-faced beside them, twisting a paperclip between trembling fingers, and across from them stood Officer Noah Mercer. Behind him, Bruno waited by the door, silent, alert, but somehow present in a way could replicate. His mere presence filled the room with a quiet, moral gravity. Noah leaned forward, planting both hands on the table. "What you just saw," he began, his voice measured but heavy, "wasn't mischief. It wasn't just boys being boys. It was targeted, prolonged, violent." Kyle looked away, muttering under his breath. "What was that?" Noah asked, lifting his chin. Kyle shifted, scowled. "He's a crybaby. We were just messing around." Bruno gave a soft growl. It was low, restrained, but unmistakably deliberate. Kyle froze. Noah didn't move, didn't raise his voice. But when he spoke again, the air changed. "You tied him. You kicked him. You threw his lunch in the snow and laughed when he cried. That's not a joke. That's not teasing. That's assault on a minor." Gasps rippled across the room. Dana gripped Kyle's arm. "He didn't mean. He's only 12. Noah turned to her, eyes calm but sharp. "Tell that to the 7-year-old, who couldn't speak for 3 days, who flinched every time a door opened." Dana opened her mouth, but no words came. Her gaze fell to the table. Miss Langdon cleared her throat, eyes glossy. We had no idea it had gone this far. I thought it was playground teasing. Children push each other sometimes. You didn't watch your cameras," Noah interrupted gently. "And when Ethan stopped showing up to school 3 days ago, no one called home." That silenced the room again. A staff member from the counseling team, Mrs. Becker, placed a trembling hand over her mouth. "I saw him alone during lunch. I thought he preferred it that way." Noah turned back to the boys. "You chose him because he was quiet, because he wouldn't fight back, and because you knew no one was looking." Bruno took a step forward, tail still, eyes locked on Kyle. "You know what Bruno did the second he saw Ethan?" Noah asked, voice soft now. "He didn't need words. He didn't need permission. He sat beside him, protected him, gave comfort before even I could. That's instinct. That's decency." Kyle's eyes shifted. "He didn't even cry," Tyler blurted, suddenly defensive. "It wasn't that bad." Noah nodded slowly. "Yes, he didn't cry. But do you know why?" He leaned in. "Because he was used to it." That hit something. Dana's hand went to her chest. Benji's father lowered his head. "I don't want you to grow up thinking this ends with detention slips," Noah said, his tone like gravel now. "Because if that's the lesson we teach, if we let boys behave like this and call it roughhousing, then we raise men who think pain is funny. We raise men who walk away when someone's suffering." Bruno let out a breath through his nose. "Report with the sheriff's office. The district will handle disciplinary actions, but there will also be mandatory community service, counseling, and a zero-contact order between you and Ethan. Any violation, and the next step is legal." Ms. Langdon stood slowly, as though the chair no longer supported her. "We'll cooperate fully. I'll speak to the board tonight. We failed him, and we failed you, Officer Mercer." Noah didn't respond. He turned to Bruno, gave a soft pat on the side. The dog's eyes lingered on Kyle one last time before following Noah out. In the hallway, the buzz of school life carried on. Shoes squeaked, lockers slammed, bells rang. But in that conference room, a reckoning had taken place. One where silence was no longer an excuse, and where a German shepherd had drawn a line, not between children and adults, but between boys and monsters. The sterile hush of Granite Hollow Medical Center hummed low under the fluorescent lights. Outside, snow continued to fall in soft veils, blanketing the world in white silence. It was mid-afternoon, but the sky had dulled to a tired gray, and in room 207, time felt suspended. Ethan lay curled on his side, the hospital blanket tucked under his chin. The IV in his arm clicked rhythmically, like a metronome counting the seconds between what was and what might be. And on the floor beside the bed, Bruno lay still, head resting on his crossed paws, amber eyes half closed but aware. He hadn't left since they were granted permission to let him in, breaking protocol in quiet rebellion. No one argued, no one dared. Noah sat in the corner chair, coat draped over his knees, boots still dusted with salt. He'd barely moved in an hour, watching the small rise and fall of Ethan's breathing, the flicker of fingers under the blanket, like a boy rehearsing words he hadn't said in a long time. Then, I thought I died. The voice was barely above a whisper, dry and hesitant. Noah straightened. "Hey, buddy." Ethan turned his head slowly, eyes not frightened this time, but distant, like someone coming back from a long way off. "When I couldn't feel my fingers anymore, I thought I died," the boy said. "But then I felt something warm." It was Bruno. Noah's throat tightened. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, not interrupting. "He didn't bark," Ethan continued. "He didn't scare me, he just sat there, real still, like he was listening." Ethan blinked slowly. "He made me feel like I wasn't alone." Bruno let out a soft breath through his nose and gently nudged Ethan's hand with his muzzle. The boy let it rest there, small fingers curling into fur, as if anchoring himself. Noah gave a quiet nod. "He's good at that. Bruno doesn't talk, but he hears better than most." Ethan's lip quivered, replied, "And they don't judge us for it." Ethan let that settle. His thumb rubbed absent circles against Bruno's ear. "I told my teacher once," Ethan said suddenly, "but she said boys fight sometimes and to shake it off." "And did it stop after that?" "No." A pause. "It got worse. They said I was a snitch." Noah kept his voice even. "You know what I think?" Ethan looked up. "I think telling someone was brave. I think what you did today, letting Bruno stay, talking to me, even just lying here and breathing, all of it is brave." Ethan's eyes welled, but he didn't cry. He pressed closer to Bruno instead, resting his cheek gently on the shepherd's back. The rise and fall of the dog's chest was steady, calming. "Grown-ups always say, 'Tell us.' But when I did, they didn't do anything." That landed like a stone in Noah's chest. He knew the truth of it all too well. The gaps in the system. The well-meaning adults with too many papers and not enough time. "I'm sorry, Ethan," he said softly. "They should have listened. I should have listened sooner." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring at the blanket's edge. "It's okay," he said finally. "Bruno listened." Silence again, but not the kind that swallowed pain. This silence was softer, heavier, but safe. Ethan's voice came again, smaller. "I want to go home, but not yet." Noah nodded. "That's okay. You're not in a rush." A nurse peeked through the door, saw the scene, the boy, the dog, the quiet, and slipped away without a word. In the fading light, Ethan shifted slightly, fingers still buried in Bruno's fur. "Noah?" "Yeah?" "Can Bruno stay? Just one more night?" Noah smiled, something tired and full behind it. "As long as he wants." Bruno didn't move, didn't need to. His presence alone was a promise. As dusk crept over Granite Hollow and the world outside dimmed into blue-gray hush, a small boy began to reclaim something stolen. Not just voice, but trust. Not just safety, but the right to feel safe. And all of it stitched back together in silence, by a dog who never needed to speak to be understood. The meeting room on the second floor of Granite Hollow Sheriff's Department smelled faintly of old coffee and colder decisions. Frost feathered the windows, but inside, the chill came from something deeper than weather. Noah Hart sat alone on one end of the long table, shoulders square, uniform wrinkled at the sleeves from long hours and longer worries. Beside him, Bruno sat quietly, upright but calm, the picture of discipline. Across from them, Deputy Chief Rowan Graves stood with arms crossed. Department-sanctioned therapeutic purpose. That is a violation of protocol, Officer Hart. Noah didn't flinch. His hands folded calmly on the table. Understood. And yet, Graves continued, pacing now, you did it anyway. Noah nodded once. I did. A pause. Graves narrowed his eyes. Do you think this department is a charity organization? A therapy wing? We're law enforcement. There are rules for a reason. Noah's voice came steady, but not cold. And there are lives for a reason, too. Graves stopped walking. His boots squeaked against linoleum. You're not helping your case. Bruno stirred slightly, ears twitching as if sensing the rising tension, but he didn't growl. He simply leaned closer to Noah, nose brushing the man's knee. Noah noticed, and that subtle gesture steeled him. Sir, he said, with all due respect, if I hadn't broken that protocol, we'd still be staring at a 7-year-old boy who won't speak. We'd be calling it exposure, or a fight gone too far. We'd have no names, no video, no testimony, and worst of all, we'd have no truth. You're emotional, Graves replied, dismissive. That's dangerous in this line of work. Noah stood slowly, not to intimidate, but because something in him couldn't stay seated anymore. I'm not emotional. I'm human, he said. And what's dangerous is pretending that what Bruno did wasn't real, that it wasn't necessary, that it wasn't what this boy needed, more than an affidavit or a clipboard. Graves walked toward the window, letting the silence stretch. Outside, kids were just being dismissed from Red Valley Elementary, snowflakes collecting on backpacks, laughter echoing faintly in the lot below. The world kept moving, unaware of the small war behind closed doors. Bruno's a canine, not a counselor, Graves finally muttered. Noah's tone softened but didn't yield. He's both, and that's what makes him irreplaceable. Rowan turned around, and that's what makes him dangerous. To who? Noah asked. The silence after that was heavier than the last. You realize, Graves said quietly, this could set precedent. Every handler bringing in their dog to comfort a witness. Next thing you know, policy crumbles. Noah's voice dropped, a thread of weariness beneath the steel. Maybe it should. Maybe some walls are meant to crumble. Bruno let out a soft paper. You didn't have either. You had an instinct. You had a feeling. I had a boy who was disappearing in front of us, Noah said, and I had a dog who reached him when no one else could. They stood across the table, two men who wore the same badge but walked different paths. Graves' gaze flickered to Bruno, then back to Noah. Was it worth your job? The room grew quiet. Even the heating vents seemed to hush. Noah didn't hesitate. If doing the right thing costs me a badge, then the badge isn't worth what I thought it was. Bruno stood slowly, his tail low but steady. He moved around the table, not toward Graves but toward the door, as if saying, "We're done here." Graves watched them. He didn't speak, he didn't nod. He didn't even write a single note in the folder. But as Noah reached the door and placed his hand on the handle, Graves finally said without turning around, "Keep him off the record. No more hospital visits, no press, no precedent." Noah looked back. "You have my word." Then, "But I won't apologize." Graves didn't respond. Bruno pushed the door open with his nose, and man and dog walked out into the hallway, where the warmth returned, and the echoes of cold policy faded into something softer, like hope. It started as a single photo. A nurse named Mariana Flores, working the pediatric night shift at Granite Hollow Medical Center, had lingered outside Ethan's hospital room just a moment too long. Something about the silence inside had drawn her in. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper, stillness, trust, safety. She'd seen them curled together, Bruno, the German shepherd, stretched out like a warm barrier between the boy and the world. And Ethan, small, fragile, but no longer trembling, one tiny hand buried in the fur behind Bruno's ear. Mariana didn't post it out of protest. She didn't tag the department, didn't write a caption that accused anyone of failure or hypocrisy. She simply uploaded it with 7 words. "This is what healing looks like." By dawn, it had been shared over 200 times. By noon, it had gone national. Granite Hollow wasn't a big town, but it had a big heart. And when it loved loudly. It wasn't long before local parents began speaking out, their comments appearing like falling snow. One flake, then another, then suddenly a storm of warmth, grief, and awakening. My daughter rides that same bus. Thank God for Bruno. We tell our kids to speak up, but when they do, no one listens. This dog did. He's more than a canine, he's a lifeline. Inside the break room of Red Valley Elementary, teachers clustered over their coffee mugs, their conversations left. Maybe that's what we should have paid attention to. "Do you think Kyle's parents knew?" another asked, voice hushed. "They had to," someone else murmured. "That kind of cruelty doesn't just appear out of nowhere." "I don't know," said Jody. "But I know Bruno didn't hesitate. He just knew. Like he was listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear." The hashtag Bruno the Witness began trending by nightfall. It wasn't just the photo anymore. It was the quiet understanding in the dog's posture, the softness in Ethan's fingers curled into fur. It was the silence that had screamed, and the dog who answered. News crews lined the outer edges of the hospital parking lot, careful not to intrude, but present all the same. The town hadn't had this much media attention since the wildfire scare 5 years ago. At the front of it all stood Sophie Lynn, regional anchor for Channel 6 and a former Granite Hollow native herself. Her voice, calm but unmistakably moved, narrated over a montage of photos, interviews, and a short clip from Mariana's phone. He wasn't trained for therapy. He wasn't trained to coax out trauma. And yet, somehow, this dog did what no one else could. He made a broken boy feel safe. Sophie stood in front of the hospital, microphone in hand, snow gently falling around her navy coat. The camera panned behind her to the window of Ethan's room. A soft glow silhouetted the boy's small frame. And next to him, a distinct figure, unmoving and solid, was Bruno. Tonight, Granite Hollow isn't just thanking a first responder, it's thanking a friend, a protector, a witness. Back at the sheriff's station, Noah sat with his eyes fixed on the flickering screen in the briefing room. The television had been muted, but Sophie's words could be read in closed captioning, scrolling gently across the bottom. Bruno lay beside him, ears flicking slightly at the shifting lights, as if recognizing his own image on screen. A knock came at the door. It was Mariana Flores, still in her pale blue scrubs, hospital badge swinging gently from her collar. She carried a cardboard drink tray with 2 coffees. "I figured you hadn't eaten," she said simply, stepping inside. Noah gave her a tired but grateful smile. "You figured right." Mariana set the drinks down and then hesitated, eyes resting on Bruno. "He hasn't left Ethan's side," she whispered. "Even when he's asleep. Like he's keeping watch over dreams, too." "He is," Noah replied. "He always does." Mariana sat beside him. "I heard about the disciplinary review." Noah sighed. "It's complicated." "No, it's not," she said gently but firmly. "What you and Bruno did, that wasn't just protocol. That was human. And people see that now." At her tail thumping once, not playful, not performative, just acknowledgement. Connection. "I've been a nurse for 12 years, Mariana added, and I've never seen a child come back from that kind of silence so fast. It wasn't the medication, it wasn't the IV, it was him." Noah didn't speak. He couldn't. There was a lump in his throat he hadn't expected. He glanced down at Bruno. "You hear that, partner?" he murmured. "You've gone and started a movement." Bruno tilted his head slightly, then rested his chin on Noah's boot. Outside, in the growing quiet of evening, snowflakes fell like tiny miracles, each one a voice, a breath, a reminder that even the smallest acts of empathy could ripple through an entire town. The community hall of Granite Hollow hadn't seen this many bodies packed into one room since the winter flood of '09. Folding chairs lined the aisle in uneven rows, shoes scuffed against the floor as parents, teachers, and staff filled every inch of space, murmuring in subdued tones. At the far end, a large banner still hung from the last science fair. "Learning starts with listening." No one had noticed it before tonight. Noah sat near the back, not in uniform, not in command. Just a man in a brown sweater with sleeves rolled to his elbows, hand resting absently on the back of Bruno's neck. The dog sat calmly beside him, alert but grounded, as if aware that this room too needed his presence. The gavel struck once. "Order!" Superintendent Elaine Maddox said softly. Her voice was tight but composed, hands clenched around her stack of notes. "We are now officially convening this emergency session of the Granite Hollow School Board. The subject, student safety, recent misconduct, and administrative response." The murmuring stilled, though emotion still trembled just beneath the surface, like snow heavy on the eaves, one shift away from falling. A microphone crackled. First to speak was Mrs. Geraldine Carter, longtime bus supervisor and former cafeteria manager. She adjusted her glasses with fingers that trembled slightly. "I've known Rickman 30 years, she began. "We shared holiday shifts, swapped shifts when his wife was sick. But what happened last week, I can't ignore it." There was a pause. "That boy sat outside in 20-degree weather for who knows how long. And Rickman's logbook says, drop-off complete, no incident. That's not oversight, that's indifference." A few heads nodded. Some didn't. A man near the front, flannel jacket, steelworker hands, raised his voice.
Lifelong resident.
Her cheeks were flushed, jaw tight. "I'm not here to attack anyone. I know how hard all of you work. But my daughter Molly came home crying when she heard what happened to Ethan. Said she saw Kyle push him before, even last semester, but thought she wasn't supposed to say anything." Her voice cracked. She thought being liked mattered more than doing right. "That's what we're teaching them?" Someone in the corner dabbed their eyes. Others stared at the floor. Superintendent Maddox cleared her throat, her gaze sweeping the room. "We've begun an internal review," she said. "Effective immediately. Kyle Jensen is suspended, pending a full investigation. But more importantly, we are reviewing our entire response framework for reports of bullying, abuse, and misconduct." A man near the aisle raised his hand. "And the bus driver?" Elaine nodded once. "Mr. Rickman has been placed on administrative leave. Pending further findings, I will be recommending termination." The words landed like dropped stone. Noah sat straighter, jaw tight. He hadn't come tonight to speak, but Bruno's ears twitched, and for some reason, that small flicker gave him courage. He stood. "I don't mean to interrupt," he began, "but I think some of what's been said misses something important." All eyes turned to him. "I was there when Bruno found Ethan. That boy wasn't just cold or scared. He was shut down, silent, injured. We wouldn't have known any of it if Bruno hadn't sensed what none of us could." He paused, choosing his words like stones across a river. "But what kept me up at night wasn't that he got hurt. It was how long it took anyone to see it." The air shifted, less defensive, more quiet, more real. "We tell our kids that bullies are just mean kids. But this wasn't teasing. It wasn't horseplay. It was cruelty. Coordinated. Hidden. And we only saw it because a dog decided to not stay in the patrol car that day." A long beat passed. "I've been asked to explain why I broke protocol, bringing Bruno into the hospital. I'll take whatever consequence comes from that, but I won't apologize for it. Because Ethan didn't speak to doctors, didn't speak to me. He only spoke to him." He nodded down to Bruno, whose gaze swept the room unblinking. "And I think that tells us something." No one clapped, but no one looked away either. Near the front row, an older man with a school badge, Principal Harmon, slowly stood. "I've worked with kids nearly 30 years, he said, voice thin with fatigue. "I thought I'd gotten better at recognizing the ones who are drowning in silence." His eyes glistened. "But I missed this one." Noah sat down quietly. Bruno curled at his feet. Superintendent Maddox looked at "An apology," she said quietly. "But we also owe him change." She closed her folder, then looked directly at Bruno. "And to Bruno, we owe our thanks for being the witness we didn't know we needed." That night, the science fair banner still hung above the room, rippling gently in the heater's hum. Learning starts with listening. For once, Granite Hollow truly did. The small counseling office at Granite Hollow Middle smelled faintly of lavender oil and No. 2 pencils, a fragrance Ms. Lillian Marks kept burning in a ceramic diffuser, hoping the calm would seep into the bones of any child who stepped through her door. Late afternoon snow filtered pale light across the rug, and the radiator hissed in slow, soothing pulses. Kyle Jensen sat on the wide corduroy sofa, shoulders hunched, hands shoved deep into the kangaroo pocket of his green hoodie. He hadn't worn hair gel today. Brown curls flopped over eyes that were ringed in gray exhaustion. The swagger that once filled hallways seemed to have leaked out, leaving him smaller, shivering in his own skin. Across from him, Ms. Marks perched in a low armchair, notebook balanced on her knee, pen unopened. She didn't speak right away. Years in this room had taught her when silence was the sharpest scalpel. A clock ticked. Somewhere outside, a group of seventh graders burst into after-school laughter that evaporated quickly in the hallway hush. Kyle's jaw twitched at the sound, as though a memory tightened. "At any point," Ms. Marks said gently, "you can walk out. But the door stays open until you tell me how we got here." Kyle stared at the worn spot on the carpet. His foot jiggled. "We can start with an easy question," she offered. "How did today feel?" "Like prison," he muttered. "Why?" "They took my phone. Everyone's calling me a monster online." His voice cracked on the last word. The embarrassment stung more than any accusation. Ms. Marks nodded. "Do you believe you're a monster?" Kyle's eyes flashed up, startled. He expected condemnation, not curiosity. He swallowed. "I'm not." Her eyebrows lifted, inviting, not judging. "I'm not," he repeated, softer. I don't know why I did it." She leaned forward, elbows on her thighs, palms open. "Then let's find out." Kyle tightened the drawstring of his hoodie until the knot dug into his knuckles. Words crowded his throat, each one scraping on its way out. "Ethan never fought back," he said finally. "Made it easy. Tyler joked that he'd probably pee himself. We laughed. It was funny." His voice snagged on the word. "I thought it was funny." Ms. Marks let the admission sit like a stone dropped in water. "And now?" Kyle's shoulders began to shake. "Now I can't stop hearing him saying please. I hear it when I try being nobody." The counselor's pen remained unopened. She needed no ink to record truth spoken aloud. "So making someone smaller made you feel bigger?" Kyle nodded, tears blurring his vision. "Tyler's brother did it to him. Said it was tradition. I figured it was normal." A thin line formed between Ms. Marks's eyebrows. Not anger, grief. Tradition is only tradition until somebody decides to break it. Kyle pressed his palms to his eyes, shoulders hitching. "I hate myself," he whispered, voice muffled. "I hate what I did." For the first time since entering, he wept. Not the performative sniffles of a kid sorry he got caught, but raw, guttural sobs that bent him forward. The room absorbed the sound, lavender or no lavender, and kept him safe while he unraveled. Ms. Marks slid a box of tissues across the low table, but stayed seated, close enough to anchor, far enough to grant dignity. "Kyle, remorse means recognizing the damage, not erasing it. Ethan still carries those bruises. His fear may last longer than the marks." Kyle dragged a sleeve across his face. "I don't know how to fix it." "You can't fix him," she said, voice steady. "You can reform you." He looked up, eyes swollen, cheeks blotched red. "I want to." "Then start by naming what you took." She waited. Kyle inhaled a trembling breath. "I took his safety, his voice, his—" He shook his head, tears slipping again. "His belief that grown-ups could protect him." Ms. Marks's throat tightened, but she kept her tone soft. "You cannot give those back in one gesture, Kyle, but you can spend a lifetime proving you understand their worth." The boy nodded, hiccuping. "What if he never forgives me?" "Forgiveness is his journey," she replied. "Remorse is yours." A hush settled. Snowflakes brushed the window in quiet constellations. Footsteps passed outside. The school nurse's soft humming faded down the hall. Kyle cleared his throat, voice hoarse. Can you tell Officer Noah I'm sorry?" Ms. Marks considered. "It will mean more from you, and one day maybe Ethan will hear it too, not as an excuse, but as acknowledgement." He swallowed hard, then whispered, "Okay." She finally opened her pen, scribbled a small note on a slip of paper, and slid it toward him. "Homework," she said. 3 lines. What I did, why it was wrong. 1 step I'll take today. Big letters. Use your own words. Kyle took the paper with shaking hands. Today? Today, she affirmed, because remorse without action is just regret drying on his cheeks. Outside, the corridor stretched empty and echoing. The boy who had made a game of cruelty walked slower than he ever had. Step, breathe, step, carrying a thin paper slip and something heavier, the first real weight of accountability. And somewhere downtown, a German shepherd lay beside a sleeping child, oblivious to the tears of the one who had finally begun to change. The sky over Granite Hollow glowed a fragile pink when Officer Noah parked the patrol SUV at the curb in front of Red Valley Elementary. Snow still quilted the lawn, but the worst of winter's bite had eased. Soft drifts glittered like sugar under the first honest sun Ethan had seen in weeks. Noah stepped out first, rounded to the passenger side, and opened the door. Bruno leapt down with quiet authority, landing light on the salted pavement. Around his chest sat a brand-new navy vest, the stitching neat and proud. Therapy Dog of Honor, Granite Hollow District. Ethan followed, one mittened hand resting on Bruno's back for balance. The boy's cheeks were pink from the chill, but his eyes, still guarded, held a glimmer Noah hadn't witnessed before. Expectation, not fear. School drop-off was a rush of cars and chatter most mornings, yet when students noticed the pair, the hum ebbed into hush. Conversations paused. Zippers froze halfway. A ripple opened through the crowd, the way wind parts tall grass. Respectful, uncertain, but laced with something close to awe. Ethan's boots crunched over fresh spread gravel. Each step was slow, measured, but steady. Every few feet, Bruno glanced up, checking the boy's pace, then looked forward again, silent sentinel of a path newly safe. Near the main doors, a girl in a maroon puffer coat broke from the line. She was small. Freckles scattered across the bridge of her nose like sprinkles of cinnamon. Molly Randall, Noah recognized, the nurse's daughter. She walked right up, mitten twisting nervously, then smiled. "Hi, Ethan." Her voice was careful, as though words might bruise. "I saved a seat at lunch, if you want." A flicker crossed Ethan's face, surprise first, then something warmer. He didn't answer aloud, but nodded once. Molly's smile widened. She gave Bruno a quick scratch behind the ear before darting back to her friends, whispering triumphantly. The door monitor, Mr. Becker, stepped aside with a respectful nod. "Welcome back, champ." His eyes shimmered. He swallowed hard before adding, "We missed you." Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed softly over the entryway mural. Handprints of every student painted like falling leaves. Reverence. They reached the gymnasium doors just as the bell rang. Principal Harmon stood by the bleachers and offered Ethan a reassuring nod. Sunlight spilled through high windows, striping the hardwood in gold. Rows of students whispered until Harmon raised 2 fingers for silence. Ethan and Bruno walked the center aisle. The wooden floor echoed under small boots. Bruno's claws tapped a steady rhythm beside them. All eyes followed, yet none stared the way they once had, like predators scenting weakness. Today, gazes held something softer, a shared understanding that cruelty had been seen and named. Halfway down, Ethan slowed. Bruno stopped instantly, posture relaxed but ready. A second grader slid over on the front row bench, making room without a word. Ethan glanced up at Noah for permission. Noah's smile was small but certain. He nodded. Ethan sat, backpack hugged to his chest, Bruno curling into the space at his feet. The German shepherd rested his head across Ethan's sneakers, eyes half-lidded, body forming a barricade of calm. Cameras clicked from the local press, but flashes were kept low. In the back row, Sophie Lynn lowered hers first, setting an example. This moment belonged to the boy, not the headline. Principal Harmon stepped to the mic. "Before we begin announcements," he said, voice carrying gentle authority, "I want to welcome a student who's been gone a little while." He gestured. "Ethan, we're glad you're here, and we're honored to host Officer Bruno, therapy dog Bruno, helping all of us remember what courage looks like." A wave of quiet applause rose, soft so as not to startle. Ethan's ears reddened, but he didn't hide. Instead, his hand slid down, fingers threading into Bruno's fur. The dog's tail thumped twice against the floor. Noah watched from the doorway, pride and ache tangling in his chest. He thought of hospital halls, of a bruised child afraid of adult hands, of a growl that had cut through apathy. All spiraled to this small, luminous scene. A boy, a dog, a seat willingly saved. Molly turned from 2 rows ahead, gave Ethan a thumbs up. He managed a tiny smile in return, the kind that trembled but held. Morning announcements carried on. Basketball tryouts, snow day reminders, but the gym felt changed, resilient. The usual clamor dulled under a shared vow, neither spoken nor written. "We will notice next time." When the bell released them to class, students filed out, parting again around Ethan and Bruno. Some offered shy waves, others murmured hi. No one pushed, no one mocked, and though forgiveness was toward room 12. Each step another stitch in the fabric of a boy's mending world. At the corner, Ethan paused, turned, and met Noah's gaze across the bustling hall. He didn't speak, but his nod said everything. "I'm okay." Noah tipped 2 fingers to his brow in silent salute. Then he watched as Bruno guided Ethan into the classroom, tail wagging once in a slow, satisfied arc, before the door clicked shut on the first day of the rest of the boy's life. Lunch hour smelled of tomato soup and wet mittens. In the cafeteria, metal chairs scraped and clattered in their usual chaos. Yet a curious hush traveled from table to table when Kyle Jensen appeared in the doorway. He wore the plain gray sweatshirt issued during his in-school suspension. Hood down, hair still unruly from tears shed in Ms. Marks's office. By policy, he wasn't allowed near other students. But today the counselor stood beside him, silent escort, gentle prod. Across the room, Ethan sat at the end of a long bench with Molly and 2 other second graders trading knock-knock jokes. Bruno lay beneath the table, vest bright against the dull linoleum, head on pause, eyes half closed, yet tracking every movement. Kyle's sneakers squeaked as he crossed the tile. Conversations ebbed. Forks hovered mid-air. Some children stared, others shifted uncomfortably. Guilt rode his shoulders like an older, heavier brother. In his right hand, he clutched a small, folded piece of notebook paper, edges frayed, graphite smudged from anxious fingers. He stopped a safe distance from the table. "Ethan?" The single word quivered, thinner than cafeteria steam. Ethan looked up. His spoon paused. Bruno's ears twitched. He lifted his head, but remained still. Silence telescoped, pressing at eardrums. Kyle inhaled, forced his voice steady. "I wrote something." He held out the note, like an offering. Ms. Marks said, "It should be in my own words." Noah, who stood near the exit supervising, tensed, but did not interfere. The counselor lingered a few paces back, safety net, witness, but allowing the boys to steer. Ethan's eyes darted to Bruno. The dog didn't move, but his gentle gaze seemed to say, "Choice is yours." After a heartbeat, Ethan slid off the bench. His boots scuffed softly as he crossed the small gap. Kyle extended the paper with both hands, as though passing something fragile. Ethan took it, slow, deliberate. The graphite message on the outside read only, "I was wrong." Nothing more. No excuses, no but. Just the blunt allowing him to give it. Behind him a chair squeaked. A sixth grader who once laughed at Ethan looked away, cheeks burning. At another table, two eighth-grade girls exchanged glances, one mouthed about time. A ripple of reckoning moved through the cafeteria. Cruelty had a witness now, and regret wore a face they recognized. Molly scooted sideways, leaving a gap on the bench. She patted the seat. Subtle invitation. Kyle shook his head. Maybe another day. His voice cracked, but not with bravado, with the ache of understanding that some doors open slowly. Bruno rose, stretched, and walked the few steps toward Kyle. The room held its breath. The shepherd stopped short, lifted his muzzle, and pressed it gently against Kyle's knuckles, just once. Not forgiveness, not condemnation, a quiet acknowledgement. Step taken. Keep walking. Kyle's eyes filled. He gave a single trembling nod, then turned toward the counselor. Together they left the cafeteria, sneakers whispering a promise along the tiles. When the doors swung shut, sounds slowly returned. Soup slurps, whispered jokes, the clang of a lunch tray. Yet something intangible had shifted, a lighter gravity, a recognition among dozens of young hearts that change, however small, was possible. Ethan climbed back onto the bench. Bruno settled under the table again, chin resting on Ethan's boot. Molly leaned close. "You okay?" Ethan's fingers brushed the folded paper in his pocket. He didn't answer right away, but a long, steady breath escaped his lips. "Not yet," he said, voice quiet but sure. "Maybe soon." Across the room, Noah exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, and offered Ms. Marks a silent nod of gratitude. She returned it, eyes shimmering. Redemption hadn't arrived wrapped in applause or absolution. It came in graphite, on lined paper, carried by trembling hands. Not absolving the past, but tilting the future. Just enough for light to slip in, and in that cafeteria filled with winter coats and the scent of tomato soup, a boy kept a letter he wasn't ready to read, beside a dog who had taught an entire town how to listen before they speak. The makeshift studio sat quietly in the corner of Granite Hollow Public Library, warmed by a single LED panel and the hum of tension in the air. Picture books lined the backdrop. Sophie Lynn, Channel 6's beloved anchor, adjusted her lavender scarf and gave a small nod to the crew. 30 seconds, the camera operator called. Officer Noah Callan entered with Bruno, the German shepherd wearing a navy vest. Therapy dog of a... "Glad to be here." Bruno's amber eyes met Sophie's gently. "Our viewers have seen the viral photo, the footage of Ethan at the bus shelter," Sophie said. But what did Bruno see that adults didn't? Noah looked down at Bruno. Pain, he said quietly. The kind only dogs still notice. Sophie pressed. Pain we missed or chose not to see? Both, he answered. Kids learn quickly which hurts adults ignore. Bruno doesn't ignore silence. He listens beneath it. She leaned forward. Tell us what happened that morning. Noah's voice was filled with quiet awe. He locked eyes on the shelter and pulled. No barking, no hesitation. When we reached Ethan, Bruno lay down beside him like it was the most natural thing, and the boy reached out, like Bruno was the first solid thing he'd touched in a long time. Sophie's throat tightened. Critics say you broke protocol bringing Bruno into the hospital. I say evil doesn't make appointments, Noah replied. When a kid's spirit is slipping, you use what works. That day, it was a dog who sees hearts before headlines. Sophie nodded slowly. Some want canine therapy in all district schools. Others worry about cost, liability. What's your hope? My hope is we stop measuring worth in dollars and start measuring it in saved childhoods. Bruno's yearly upkeep is cheaper than one lawsuit, one funeral, or a lifetime of therapy after we fail a child. Sophie lowered her hand toward Bruno. May I? Bruno stepped forward and gently placed his chin in her palm. She whispered, He's extraordinary. Noah smiled. Extraordinary and ordinary. He reminds us every good instinct is already in us, just buried under noise. Sophie's final question came quietly. What's next? We're ready. Any room that needs us, classroom, courtroom, living room, we'll show up. Because kids like Ethan don't have time for bureaucracy to catch up. As the red tally light blinked off, the crew let out a breath. Sophie shook Noah's hand. Thank you for giving him a voice. No, Noah said. You just helped people hear what was always there. That night, Deputy Chief Rowan Graves sat in her office, the interview still playing in her mind. Rules had always been her compass, but now she felt something shift. A knock broke her thoughts. Come in. Noah entered, Bruno calm beside him. I've never been one to bend rules, Rowan began. I know, Noah replied quietly. But maybe the rules have blind spots, she admitted. And what happens when they protect systems, not people? Noah nodded. Bruno didn't see a policy. He saw a boy falling apart. Rowan looked toward the window. All the protocols in the world didn't see Ethan. Bruno did. She pulled out a folder. We've had calls, parents, teachers, even pediatricians, asking about therapy dogs. Noah leaned forward. Considering something? Rowan exhaled. A pilot program, structured, official. A canine therapy unit here in Granite Hollow. Noah blinked. That could change everything. I'll speak to the sheriff, she said, and I'd want you and Bruno to lead it. Noah straightened. We'd be honored. Before he left, Rowan hesitated. I had a dog like Bruno once. When my father died, she stayed by my mother's side for days. We called it loyalty, but maybe it was understanding. She looked at Bruno, her voice softer now. Maybe we forgot how powerful that can be. Granite Hollow didn't do parades, no confetti, no brass bands, just families gathering under evergreens and fading leaves. A quiet town square holding its breath. But today was different. Children held handmade signs. Teachers, nurses, shopkeepers, all lined the gazebo where Bruno sat beneath a maple tree. He didn't bark, he didn't wag. He simply was, calm, present, still. Officer Callan knelt beside him, hand resting on the shepherd's fur. The mayor adjusted her glasses and stepped to the podium. We don't gather here today for medals earned in gunfights or solved crimes, she said. We gather for something harder. She looked at Bruno. He listened. A hush fell over the crowd. He saw what adults didn't. He stood between a boy's broken ribs and a broken system. And he did it without words, without hesitation, without ego. Then she turned to Ethan. The boy stepped forward from the crowd. His cheeks were fuller now, his eyes clearer. He held a bouquet and a small velvet box. Without a word, Ethan fastened the silver medallion around Bruno's neck. The inscription, Service, above silence. Bruno didn't react, no wag, no movement, just stillness, like he understood the weight wasn't a prize, but a promise. Ethan whispered, so quiet, only Noah heard. He made me brave when I couldn't talk. Bruno leaned gently into Ethan, his muzzle brushing the boy's ribs in quiet recognition. Applause rose, not loud, not showy, just a wave of reverence, one clap then another. Gratitude, not celebration. Somewhere in the back, an elderly man removed his cap, pressing it to his chest. His voice cracked. That boy was me once. Journalists tried to capture it all, but no lens could record the quiet between a child and the dog who saw him first. This wasn't a story of spectacle. It was a story of noticing, of presence over protest, of dignity without a single bark. The ceremony ended without fanfare, no balloons, just a plaque placed later at the elementary school entrance reading, "Because one dog refused to look away." As the crowd dispersed, kids approached Bruno. He accepted each hand with silent grace. One child placed a sticker bandage on his vest and whispered, "For the boy you helped." Bruno's sighed. The townspeople didn't follow. They watched, as one might watch something sacred disappear around a corner. Because not all heroes wear badges. Some wear fur, carry silence, and leave healing in their wake. The sheriff's office smelled faintly of old coffee and pine cleaner, scents soaked into decades of duty. Afternoon light sliced through the blinds, striping the floor and catching the edges of framed photos, ribbon cuttings, retired canines, and one fading shot of a young Cal Whitaker beside his father in uniform. Noah sat in the leather chair. Bruno curled at his feet, one ear cocked in half-sleep. The ceremony had passed, but silence still felt more sacred than small talk. Across the desk, Sheriff Whitaker studied him, not suspicious, just reflective. "You planning to leave?" Noah blinked. "No, not yet." Cal nodded slowly. "Didn't think so. A man only stays after something like this if he's still looking for something." Noah gave a faint smile. "You bring me in to psychoanalyze me?" Cal chuckled, then slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a draft flyer, its title written in block print, "Listening Like Bruno, Empathy and Action in Schools." Noah raised an eyebrow. "You wrote this?" "My daughter typed." I thought. The proposal outlined a school outreach program. No jargon, just sketches of lessons about noticing silence, standing up, and stepping in. On each page, one name was underlined, Bruno. "You want a dog to run assemblies?" Noah asked. "I want a presence," Cal said softly. "When you walk in with Bruno, kids sit straighter. The quiet ones look up. That kind of respect can't be assigned. It's earned." Noah glanced down at Bruno. The dog snored lightly, tail twitching. "Most of these kids," Cal went on, "they've seen too much or not enough. And you two, you don't need to say much. They just believe you care." Noah looked up. "Why me?" "Because you didn't just break protocol. You broke silence. That takes more guts than most realize." "They're still investigating it." "I know. And I also know the town would riot if anyone touched you. You let a dog lead a case, and the world got better." Outside, a school bus turned the corner. Its brake lights blinked like fireflies. "Ethan's going back full-time next week," Noah said. "He doesn't flinch at closing doors anymore." "That boy," Cal said quietly, "is why we do this." Noah tapped the file. "You want me to teach kids how to not become Kyle?" "No," Cal corrected gently. "I want you to teach them not to be bystanders. And to show the Ethans it's okay to speak, and that someone will listen." Noah hesitated. "I'm not great with speeches." "Good," Cal replied. "We don't need speeches. We need stories, and you got a few." Visits Monday. Principal Green's expecting you." Noah took it. "You think this will work?" "I think kids remember who shows up. That's more than half the battle." Noah stood. Bruno rose beside him, joints cracking quietly. Before leaving, Noah turned back. "You ever think a dog would end up changing this town?" Cal's tired smile was full of hope. "No. But maybe that's the only kind of hero we still believe in." The bell rang at 10:05 a.m., a few seconds late. But room 104 was already quiet. 27 fifth-grade students watched as Bruno entered first, calm, steady, with nothing to prove. Sunlight caught the tag on his vest, Therapy Dog of Honor, Granite Hollow District. Noah followed. No badge, no gun. Just a navy shirt, sleeves rolled, and a worn messenger bag. The room stilled. Bruno padded to the front and sat beside a stool, unprompted. His eyes scanned the students, then settled on Ethan in the front row. This time, Ethan didn't shrink. He looked up and smiled. Noah crouched beside Bruno. "This is Bruno," he said. "He doesn't talk, but he listens better than anyone I know." He tapped a remote. A video began. No narration, just silent security footage. Ethan at the bus shelter, the approach, the shove, the mocking, the rope, the collapse. The screen went black. Stillness followed. Noah stood. What you saw wasn't about one bad day. It wasn't just one boy. Ethan is here not because someone stopped it, but because someone noticed. He touched Bruno's head. This dog barked. That's all he could do. But it was enough. Ethan sat up straighter. One girl in the back unfolded her arms. A boy near the windows wiped his nose. "You'll hear a lot of rules in school," Noah continued. "About respect, kindness, posters on every wall. But what matters is what you do when no one's watching. That's where character lives. That's where Bruno noticed something before any adult did." A girl raised her hand. "Was he trained to do that?" Noah looked at Bruno. "No. He was trained to detect danger. But what he did that day, that was instinct. That was love." He pulled a small envelope from his bag and handed it to Ethan. Inside, a dog tag, smaller than Bruno's, but identical. It read, "For speaking when it was hard." Ethan held it gently, eyes full.
Trembling.
"I get scared too," he whispered into Bruno's ear. "Sometimes I don't tell." Bruno pressed his nose gently to the boy's chest. The boy smiled, just a little, but it was the kind you only catch if you're really watching. Then other students rose, not to talk, just to approach. One rested her forehead to Bruno's. Another read the vest out loud. One held out a hand but didn't touch, just needed to stand near. The teacher by the door, Ms. Janelli, didn't speak, but her eyes did. Noah stood. You don't have to be an officer, or a hero, or even brave every day. You just have to notice when someone feels small, and show them they're not invisible. His eyes swept the room. Pain hides in plain sight. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it stays quiet. This guy, he said, nodding to Bruno, taught me that. Maybe he's teaching you too. The room stayed still. Then the bell rang. You're dismissed, Noah said softly, but don't forget what you felt today. Some kids rushed off. Others didn't. One girl left a tiny folded note beside Bruno's paw. She didn't say what was inside. Ethan walked up and offered Noah a quiet fist bump. Noah returned it. Bruno stood, tail swaying gently, brushing against Ethan's side. Outside the hallway waited. Life would resume, but inside room 104, something had shifted. Not in policy or procedure, but in presence, in courage, in how silence would no longer go unnoticed, and in the sacred way a dog had taught a town to listen. The letter came on a Thursday morning. Plain white envelope, no seal, no fanfare. Just Noah's name typed clean across the front. He stood in the hallway of the sheriff's office, holding it as if it might vanish. Bruno sat beside him, ears perked. Inside, the message was short. Officer Noah Jensen is hereby cleared of all policy violations. Suspension lifted, effective immediately. Noah read it twice. The words felt too light for what they carried. Bruno huffed and pressed his head to Noah's knee. "You're reinstated too, partner," Noah whispered. Bruno licked his wrist, like he already knew. That afternoon, Sheriff Cal Whitaker stood before the Budget Committee, still wearing his old Stetson. His voice was calm but firm. "This isn't just about rules. It's about what happens when we punish compassion. It nearly cost a child his voice." He held up a folder. In 10 days, the community raised $47,000 for the K-9 unit. An anonymous donor matched it. The room fell quiet. Treasurer Keener raised her hand. "I propose a motion to reinstate full K-9 funding and launch therapy integration, effective immediately." The vote was unanimous. Bruno sees me. Sophie Lynn's segment, "The Dog That Didn't Blink," aired nationally. It showed Bruno curled beside Ethan's hospital bed. Then walking down a school hallway, students parting quietly around him. Donations poured in from across the country. One letter simply read, "I was Ethan once. Thank you for seeing us." At Granite Hollow Elementary, 2 benches appeared outside the counselor's office. One said, "Feel it, sit here." The other, "Ready to talk, sit here." Between them, a framed photo of Bruno and Ethan on the school steps. No child needed explanation. When Noah and Bruno returned for their second school visit, the receptionist smiled, teary-eyed. "We kept the sign-in sheet. The kids made paw prints." Inside Ms. Janelli's room, desks were arranged in a semicircle. Ethan sat front and center, not withdrawn, not hidden, rooted. A student raised her hand. "Is Bruno famous now?" "He is," Noah chuckled, "but he doesn't let it go to his head." Laughter rippled through the room like sunlight. Kids rose again, this time not hesitantly, but with quiet understanding. They lined up, not for instruction, but because they knew. Bruno wasn't just a dog. He was a space where you didn't have to explain, only be. The boy in the blue hoodie returned. He knelt beside Bruno and whispered, "I told my dad I get scared." Bruno nudged his hand. He said, "He does too." He stood and looked at Noah. "You were right. Dogs don't forget to look." Noah smiled. "Neither do kids. Not when someone shows them how." At the library's reading day, Heroes Among Us, Bruno rested by a beanbag chair, tail thumping, ears tilting at each whispered, "Bruno." One girl clutched a crayon drawing, a dog with a medal. Beneath it, Bruno saved words. At 10:10, Ethan arrived, carrying a single book wrapped in brown paper. On the front, in careful cursive, "The Dog Who Spoke Without Words." He took his seat beside Bruno, placed the book on his lap, and looked around. The mic was adjusted, but no one pushed. They waited. Ethan began softly. "Once there was a dog who didn't bark or growl. He just looked. And when he looked at you, it felt like he heard what you hadn't said." Bruno rested his chin on Ethan's shoe. People said he was too quiet to be brave. But one day he saw a boy, alone, hurting, and he sat beside him, didn't leave. Sophie Lynn, watching from the back, lowered her pen. Some heroes don't bark, some don't wear capes, some just stay, until it's safe to speak. Ethan's voice caught slightly, but he turned the last page. The boy grew strong, not because the pain disappeared, but because someone stayed long enough to show he wasn't invisible. He closed the book. The applause wasn't loud, but it held weight. A boy had reclaimed talks to. Ethan smiled. If you listen quiet enough, maybe. A mother approached Noah. My son never talks in front of people. After that story, he asked to check out the book. Noah looked toward Ethan, now showing others how to pet Bruno. He didn't just read a story, Noah said. He became one. Before leaving, Ethan approached the library's Local Heroes wall. A new photo had been added. Bruno beside Ethan at school. Plaque. He listened when the world didn't. Ethan quietly placed his book beneath it. A donation. Noah raised an eyebrow. You sure? It belongs here now, Ethan said. So other kids can hear it, even if they can't speak it yet. That night, the fire burned low. Outside, snow whispered against the windows. Inside, Noah sat in his old chair, Bruno curled at his feet. On the side table, a photo frame faced inward, not to hide, but to guard. In it, a boy stood beside a dog too big for its ears and smiling wide. Noah reached down, brushing Bruno's fur. Long week, huh? Bruno didn't stir. 17 years ago, Noah had found his son Evan curled in a closet, silent, hurt by a trusted babysitter. Evan's only words, I didn't tell, just like you said, Daddy. And he had said that months earlier about something small. Don't go telling stories just to get attention. A father's offhand remark, a child's internalized silence. Noah never forgave himself. Evan spoke again, but not to him. Their relationship became phone calls and polite distance. No anger, just absence. When Ethan came into his life, quiet, scared, something inside Noah broke open. Bruno had seen it first, like he had with Evan. A flicker behind the eyes, a tremble in a child's touch. Noah stared at the fire. You saw him, he whispered. You stayed. His hand rested on Bruno's shoulder, not petting, just resting. I rushed Evan, tried to fix it, drowned silence with guilt and noise, he swallowed. You didn't rush. You let him come to you. Bruno didn't move, but his stillness said enough. Noah leaned forward, pressed his forehead against Bruno's, and whispered, Thank you. Later, as the fire died down, Noah turned the old photo outward. Beside it, he placed a new one, Ethan and Bruno, a sunbeam warming both their faces. Two boys, two silences. One dog who waited long enough for healing to begin. Road. He was wearing the same navy blue hoodie he'd worn that morning, the one everyone remembered. But this time the sleeves weren't pulled over trembling fists, and his head wasn't bowed to the wind. This time he held the zipper steady as he tugged it to the top, like sealing a promise to himself. At his side, Bruno sat poised, tail swishing lightly over the welcome mat. His new vest shimmered faintly in the morning light. Therapy dog of honor, Granite Hollow District, embroidered in white thread. There was a patch on the left strap, hand-stitched in a child's handwriting. Thank you for listening. Ethan looked down at him and gave a single nod. "Ready?" he asked. Bruno stood. No one else stood at the door. No one hovered with a camera or wiped tears behind a curtain. Noah had said it best. The bravest steps are the ones you take when no one is clapping. Ethan didn't need applause this morning. He just needed to move. They started down the drive, Ethan's small boots leaving 2 neat lines in the snow. Bruno's paw prints formed an uneven cadence beside him. 4 pads, pause, 4 pads again, like a rhythm only they shared. The world hadn't woken up fully yet. Light still filtered softly through the pines. There were no snowplows yet, no buses grumbling through intersections. Just a small boy and a shepherd dog making their way down a silent street. And though they passed the same mailboxes, the same cracked fence posts, the same curve that once made Ethan want to turn back, something was different. The cold didn't bite this time. It kissed. As they neared the intersection where the sidewalk met Main Street, Ethan paused. He tilted his face up to the sky, letting a few flakes melt against his cheeks. Bruno stopped, too, waiting, always waiting, without a tug, without a word. A truck rolled past slowly, tires crunching against packed snow. The driver, a man in a plaid jacket and yellow beanie, leaned out the window, raised 2 fingers in a quiet salute. Ethan blinked, a little surprised, and raised his hand back. It wasn't much, just an acknowledgement, but it felt warm. The school came into view next. Granite Hollow Elementary with its stone steps and red doors, its flagpole now dusted with white. From a distance, Ethan could see silhouettes in the windows, shapes moving, talking, waving construction paper like banners. He kept walking. A few cars were pulling into the loop near the front. One mom waved. Another teacher stood near the bike rack, brushing snow off a seat. Then something new happened. As Ethan stepped onto the school walkway, the front doors opened and students began to part like a tide. They weren't whisked beside him, head level, ears forward. He didn't bark, he didn't pull. He just stayed near, as he always had, walking the exact pace Ethan walked. Inside the hallway, the warmth hit like a soft blanket. Someone had turned up the heaters too high, and the scent of cinnamon from the cafeteria drifted faintly through the vents. Holiday decorations were taped to the walls, snowflakes cut with safety scissors, each one imperfect, beautiful in its crookedness. Ethan passed a group of second graders seated cross-legged near the reading nook. One girl looked up, then tapped her friend on the arm. They whispered something, not cruel, just curious, and then gave Ethan a little wave. He didn't wave back, but his steps didn't slow. When he reached his classroom, the door was already open. Miss Dalton stood inside, sorting papers with her usual calm. She saw him, smiled softly, and stepped aside without comment. There was a new chair beside his old desk. Not a special seat, not labeled or roped off, just a place, slightly wider, where Bruno could rest without blocking anyone's way. Someone had placed a folded blanket on it. Bruno curled into the space naturally, exhaling through his nose, then resting his chin on his paws. Ethan took his seat. From across the room, a boy offered him a mechanical pencil. Nothing fancy, no eye contact, just held it out over the aisle. Ethan took it, and that was that. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and slow, but inside Granite Hollow Elementary, something else was happening. Not loudly, not all at once, but in the quiet, in the track of boots beside paw prints. A new path had begun. The auditorium lights dimmed just enough to hush the chatter. Wood seats creaked as hundreds of students shifted in place, waiting. Somewhere backstage, a teacher tapped a clipboard, whispering cues. A row of parents sat in the back, some with cameras, some with coffee cups, some with their hands tightly folded, like they weren't sure why this moment mattered, only that it did. On stage, the podium stood bare under a halo of soft light. And just off stage, Ethan smoothed the sleeve of his hoodie, the same navy one, still zipped, but cleaner now, with a small pin on the chest that read, "Braver than yesterday." Beside him, Bruno sat quietly, his silver medallion catching the light like a silent badge. His breath came slow and even, tail curled gently to the side. Noah placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, didn't say anything, just stood with him for one long second, as if giving him permission to decide. Ethan looked at Bruno. Bruno looked back. Then the boy stepped out into the light. The walk across the stage felt longer than it was. Each step echoed a little, like the floor itself was remembering all the days he hadn't spoken, hadn't looked up, who hadn't. And Bruno, sitting quietly at the side of the stage, watching. Ethan didn't have paper, he didn't have notes. He had a breath, so he took one, and then he spoke. "My name is Ethan," he began, his voice just above a whisper. "Some of you know me, some of you think you do." A few heads tilted, listening. "I didn't plan to talk," he said, hands gripping the edges of the podium. "I didn't know what I'd say, but something's been stuck inside for a long time." And Bruno, he heard it before I did. The room held still. "I was scared," Ethan continued. "That's the truth. Not just of school, or bullies, or even going home. I was scared that I didn't matter, that if I disappeared, it'd just be quieter." No one moved. One of the counselors dabbed at her eye with a tissue. Miss Dalton sat perfectly still, lips pressed together like holding something in. "But then one day," Ethan said, glancing toward Bruno, "this dog barked. Not because I told him to, not because anyone trained him to, but because he knew." He paused, throat catching a little. "He knew I was hurting, even when I didn't say it." Was ears flicked once. He didn't stand, just stayed as he was, calm, alert, present. Ethan wiped his nose on his sleeve, not caring any more about what that looked like. "I guess I'm saying this," he said, voice quieter now. "Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is listen." Bruno listened, and that's what saved me. His eyes scanned the room. "And I know there are other kids out there, kids who are scared, kids who get quiet, who think no one sees them." Another pause. "Well, I see you now," Ethan said, "and I hope, maybe you hear me too." For a long moment there was silence. Then someone clapped. A second later more joined, and within seconds the entire auditorium was on its feet. It wasn't a wild stadium roar. It was gentle, steady, like the applause you give when you know something sacred has been said, and you want to say thank you without making too much noise. Ethan didn't smile, not a big one, just the kind that flickers at the corner of the mouth, the kind that means something's shifted inside. He looked at Bruno. Bruno wagged his tail once, just once, then settled his head back down between his paws. When Ethan stepped down from the stage, Noah was waiting. He didn't ruffle his hair or give him a speech, just snow had started falling again. Not a storm, just another soft morning in Granite Hollow. But this time, a voice had risen where silence used to live. And somewhere deep in the heart of a German shepherd named Bruno, the bark that saved a life had finally come full circle. Answered not with noise, but with understanding. Something in the quiet, a kind of echo, not of the past, but of promise. Each school they visited wasn't about retelling pain. It was about teaching ears to open, teaching kids that there was no shame in being the one who needed help, or the one brave enough to notice. Noah reached over and scratched Bruno behind the ear, his voice quiet, almost like a prayer. "Somewhere out there," he said, "a kid's walking through a hallway, holding something they haven't said yet." Bruno didn't move, didn't need to. The van turned a corner, disappeared behind the trees, and for a moment, the street was still. Then, from the fresh patch of snow outside the center, the camera lingered, low to the ground, where the morning light caught something delicate. Two sets of tracks, side by side, one pair of boots, one pair of paws, headed in the same direction, not leading away, but forward. Sometimes the quietest moments between us and our dogs speak the loudest. A look, a nudge, a tail thump in the dark. Stories like Bruno's remind us that love doesn't always need words, just presence. German shepherds, with their loyalty etched into every step, remind us what it means to stay, not because they have to, but because they choose to. If this story moved something in you, stirred a memory, a longing, or even a tear, maybe it's time to lean a little closer to the dog by your side, or the one waiting for you at the shelter. There's a resource I've come to appreciate, especially for those of us who want to deepen that bond with our dogs in a more mindful, heart-led way. I'll leave the link below. No pressure, just something I thought you might find meaningful the way I did. Take your time. Dogs always do. And sometimes that's exactly how healing begins.